Welcome everybody, my name is Eugene and today we're going to talk about factors that must be considered doing strategic planning in distance education. We'll learn about its importance. Now let's get to the nitty-gritty of this one. For today's video is going to be about Pilsen's 10-phase strategic planning process model. We're going to talk about the model in phase 1 to phase 4, while the rest of the phases will be discussed by the next reporters in the next videos. Let's begin. The strategic model that we're going to discuss from Pilsen is basically called a strategic planning process model. It's basically a concise 10-phase process that includes planning, executing, and continuously improving distance education in alignment with the goals and the mission vision of the institution. Now, from Pilsen's paper, this is basically just a summary of what the model is. I discussed with you the first one, which is basically a 10-phase structure. There are 10 phases for it. We're going to discuss the 4 phases, the first 4 phases one by one. And then it's also focused on the mission of the school and the leadership, also intention of leadership. And there's 2 things that are considered. We have the environmental scanning and then gap analysis, which we'll talk about later. And of course, there should be a collaborative course of action development where there are multiple strategies taken considered. There are stakeholders input and discussing about the best approach. And then, of course, in the later part of the phases, there's implementation, there's assessment, and periodic review, which will be discussed with the next videos after mine. So basically for this model, there are 3 important parts. We have the planning starts, basically it's just the planning phase, the strategic planning process, basically the heart of the strategic planning, of course, and then the plan implementation. And along that would be inputs for feedback, as you can see arrows from implementation going back to strategic planning and planning starts. And all of these phases are also being influenced by internal strengths and weaknesses, which we're going to talk about later, and external opportunities and threats that will really give several inputs to each of these factors. So this is the 10 phases of the model from Pisels. We have planning initiation, planning guidelines, and scheduling, analysis, and mission refinement. These are the 4 we're going to talk today, while the rest will be for the rest of the video. Just to give you a big picture of this framework, so we start with planning initiation and planning guidance and schedule as a separate part together, which is included in the planning phase, which you saw in the framework a while ago. And then it goes to the strategic part, basically the center, the soul of this model. It includes analysis and mission, and of course the rest, which we're going to talk about for the other videos. But yeah, let's focus more on these 4 phases, the planning, and then we have the analysis and mission. So these are the rest of the phases from 5 to 10, which includes the implementation and of course the feedback loop from that as well. So according to Pisels, this phase basically includes strategic planning, clarification of who will lead, and defining available resources. So in here, the decision to start is important, of course, because we get formal approval from institution and from the authority, and we also get clarification of the why to the stakeholders and permission to mobilize the resources. And then we get to identify assets, what existing resources there are, like technology, funding, staff, people and their expertise, like faculty, IT specialists. And then we also get like data like enrollment trends, budget figures, potential partnership. And then once we're done with that, then we go to the assemble a team, assembly of the team, the core team, who's going to be the extended team, like the small group. There's a small group planning, a small planning group basically for the core with authority, plus a broader advisory panel. So basically it's defining these themes that are important in the initiation, planning initiation. So of course, as you can see in the model that we talk about, the planning initiation part here includes task assignment, asset identification, and planning organization, which is separate from its own. So it's really the first thing to do before starting. So for this particular phase, we're just gonna basically establish leadership direction, objectives, and a realistic schedule for milestones. Like specifically, there should be leadership intent. It includes setting purpose and overall goals, the leadership's commitment and ownership of the process, and as well as there should be a clear guidance on direction and any predetermined constraint. And then once that's done, of course, we do scheduling milestone. We set a very realistic schedule for this timeline based on the leadership intent. And we also break the planning effort into manageable phases or milestones. So it's, realistic. And then we identify which milestones are critical, which have flexibility, and which one has flexibility as well. And then it also has to align with other relevant calendars in the institution, like fiscal or academic years, so that we can determine target dates. These are important discussion here. So in this particular phase, we see it in phase 2, as you can see it there. That really just includes the two things, leadership intent and planning schedule. Here in phase 3, the analysis basically just involves two things, environmental analysis and needs or gap analysis. So when you say environmental analysis, we basically examine the factors and conditions influencing an institution's strategic planning. So this has to be internal and external strengths and weaknesses. So usually we conduct SWOT for this, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and strengths in doing an environmental analysis. Let's talk about that later. But then we also have needs and gap analysis, which is a separate analysis in its own. I'm going to show you the framework later. But here, it focuses on the difference between the institution's current capabilities and its desired future goals. We pinpoint where resources, processes, or even strategies might fall short of, which is basically what is required to achieve the objectives. Now, since we're doing environmental analysis first in phase 3, so the first thing you need to do, an example of that would be SWOT analysis. Of course, there are many more frameworks or models to use, but SWOT is pretty much a popular choice. So we got the internal and the external. So SWOT, this SW, strengths and weaknesses, that involves in the internal part. Leadership, institutional assessment, funding, mission, academic programs, infrastructures, and stakeholders. And we go to external parts, external environment, we got opportunities and strengths. We got market, competition, customers, partnership, technology, politics, and stakeholders. So we have these two things to start with, and then we go to the next phase. So just like I said, in the analysis phase, we do SWOT analysis first. As you see in the framework, SWOT analysis is there. But then we skip a phase, which is mission, which we're going to talk about next, and then come back to phase 3 again with the need gaps analysis. So it's phase 3 and phase 4 is basically like interrelated together. Like phase 4 is found in between, sandwiched between two parts of phase 3. In this particular phase, it's basically about ensuring that distance education, the goals of it clearly align with the core of the institution's mission vision. So that's the first one, mission vision alignment. So when you say vision, according to Aker in 1992 and Hoyle in 1995, this is an internal inspirational statement defining the institution's long-term core intentions. That's vision. Vision has to come first, it has to be developed first, unrestricted by immediate real-world data. So that's according to Kaufman and Herman in 1991. Well, mission is a measurable, concise statement of what, by whom, when, where, and why. That's from Kaufman in 2005. So basically, the mission vision has to be the core of the institution, and your plan later in needs gap analysis need to be aligned with this. Now we got ends versus means as well. Ends, when you say ends, it's the desired result or accomplishment or outcomes that you need to do. And means, these are the resources and methods used to achieve those ends, these outcomes. And then we also got strategy, like what must be prioritized. Strategy must prioritize ends, then determine the appropriate means. Okay. Sorry. So as you can see in the framework, mission is sandwiched between the phase three, just like I mentioned. And here we do the vision statement, the mission statement. We can also include organizational values and culture, and then the objectives or the ends and the means. And then of course, right after that would be going back to phase three, which is needs gap analysis. Knowing our mission, vision now, and our targets or objectives, we sit back and think of the gaps that we have, like the resources that we have and our objectives, like what is missing there, what's the gap, so that we can address that. So there are multiple gaps that we can utilize, and we can even do it in a subsystems view of distance education, so we can identify the gaps for each subsystem. So that's my time, everybody, but I have these two issues and queries that you can answer. So since we're talking about analysis and planning stage of DE, it's important to get feedback to be part of the planning and analysis part. So the first question is, have you ever signed up for a distance learning platform and regretted it? Why do you think it wrong? So where did it go wrong? And then the second one is, if you could build the perfect online university, what would be the first thing you'd focus on? Anything. And that's all for me. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you learned. See you around.